So last time you told us about what data you collected, and I wonder if you could tell us this time about what happened next.
Okay, yeah. I think I mentioned last time I got quite a lot more data from the carers than I did from the residents, because carers, you could be more confident that the carers had understood what was meant when I told them about data collection and how it would be used and how it would be stored and all that. You could be confident they understood, and they were more mobile, and so it was easier to do things like height and that kind of stuff. So I got a lot more data from carers than I did from residents, and with them I just did a little bit of footage, pre and post pilot, of them sitting, standing, walking, and field notes basically, and things that I got from the carers during interview about the residents and their progress. So I wrote up the four separate cases. So for each of the individual participants, I took all their data, looked at it, studied it, became familiar with it, and wrote it up as a case report, picking out things that were particularly, the main issues, or things that were of interest, or things that were significant for that person, changes over time, that kind of stuff. And because there was less data, and more open-ended data, field notes, interview data, that kind of thing. The two resident case reports, I was able to condense down to sort of one A4 side per person in sort of prose, basically. The carer cases, because there was a lot more data for each of them, were rather longer and they looked rather different. So they were about 3 sides long, and they included things like tables because I'd done questionnaires which looked at things over time. I was able to do tables about how their perceptions of pain, or perceptions of working life, or perceptions of, how they felt, how they rated their well-being generally, and that kind of thing, how that changed over the period of the 6 weeks of the study. And I had a page of photographs for each of the carers. So four photographs, sitting and standing before the pilot, and sitting and standing after the pilot, to see if they showed any change. And by golly, they did show a very significant change. Both of them looked very, very different before and after the pilot. So the two kinds of case study look quite different for residents and carers. So that was the first stage, writing the four case reports, and the second stage was sort of reading through all the cases again, and sort of teasing out points that seemed to be common to all, or that were interesting or surprising, or whatever. Um, so those are kind of like the two stages of analysis, of write up and analysis of the data.
Hmm, thank you. So, can you tell us what the data revealed, what you found?
Yeah, sure. I can't tell you everything because actually they revealed a heck of a lot. I could probably write a book about it. I mean, the data was so rich, and I got to know them all so well over the 6 weeks. Um, but just sort of to pull out a few of the sort of main points, if you like. Um, the I can just use a few quotes and examples to illustrate. I think there were four things that were common to all of them, which I think are worth mentioning, and most of them won't be a massive surprise to teachers of the Alexander technique, I don't think. So the first one is to do with living with pain, and all four residents had a reduction in pain. Obviously, for the carers, that could be self-reported. Um, but in the case of the residents, it was evidence in things like requests for pain medication, and reports from the carers and my own observations. So, just to give a few examples, the most elderly of the residents, the 97-year-old, she had really, really bad back pain. And when I did the study, I'd been going to the home for a year and a half. So my mum moved in 2016 in December. The summer of 2018 is when I did the study. And just about every day I'd gone in there, and this resident had come up to me as I walked past, her room in the corridor, and sort of said, "Oh, I've got this terrible pain in my neck. Could I have some medication or whatever?" And this had been going on the whole time, and she obviously was in a lot of pain. Um, and I remember after her first Alexander lesson, one of the carers said, "Oh, how did you get on with your lesson with Charlotte?" And she said, "Well, look, I can do this." And she said, "I couldn't do that before," so she couldn't move her head at all. And after the lesson, she was able to move her head. And over time, her request for medication stopped. And I mean, I'm not saying she didn't have any pain, but it was very, very much reduced. So that was good. Um, the younger carer, another example, she had a really, really severe hip problem. She had a birth defect in her hip, and when the first photographs I took, she in sitting, she was unable to bend her right leg at all. So as I say, this is a 24-year-old. She'd already been offered hip replacement surgery at 24, and she was in a lot of pain. You could tell. And when I gave out the questionnaires, the MyMOC questionnaire I mentioned in the last video, she chose hip pain as one of her symptoms to track over time. And at the beginning of the study, before the pilot started, she rated the pain in her hip as bad as it could be. And by the end of the pilot, it was as good as it could be, and she was walking freely and easily, and said she didn't really have any hip pain. So that was just fantastic. Um, and what I found really gratifying, I'm just going to share a couple of quotations um, from the carers here. So one of them said, this is the younger one. These are not their real names, by the way. I've changed their names, but I'll call her Hannah for now. When I kneel down and stand up, I stop and I think so it doesn't hurt me. And Liz about her back pain, which had got a lot better. I'm more mindful when I'm moving and positioning people. So that was really gratifying that they were obviously applying their Alexander technique in their working lives to combat their persistent pain problems. So that was very pleased about. So that was the first theme. A second theme that was common to all, and again no surprise to any Alexander teachers out there, balance and mobility changed amongst all the residents, including amongst all the participants, including the two residents. They were more flexible in their hips and knees and joints generally. The slightly younger resident, the mid-70s resident, walked with a frame, and she was much rather more upright, less stooped. And the carers as well were moving much more freely, more gracefully, more easily. Again, as I say, no massive surprise, but it was nice to see. And a third theme that emerged very strongly in all four was one of mood and motivation, so a lighter mood, more motivated. Um, and so the residents, I saw the most elderly resident, the 97-year-old. I don't think I'd ever seen her smile or look anything other than, pained and uncomfortable and down the whole time I'd been visiting. And I actually saw her laugh and smile a couple of times, and she was just generally much lighter. She sort of praised the kindness of the staff and the cleanliness of the home and all this kind of thing. And it's not the kind of thing you would have heard from her or I'd ever witnessed from her before that point, before doing her Alexander lessons. Um, and there's some couple again. I'll share some quotes from the carers. Um, so Hannah, again, not a real name. I feel better in myself, happier. There's been a lot going in my life, and by golly, there had been just a very complicated personal life, and the technique has really helped. And Liz talking about her anxiety. Before I'd get a bit panicky in the morning thinking, do I really want to go in today? I'm not doing that anymore. I come in and face what's ahead regardless. So they're feeling more positive about their working lives, more motivated. They both said they felt much less tired. They have these 12-hour shifts, very, very tiring, but they were coping with that and feeling less tired at the end of a shift and that kind of thing. So that was, again, very positive. And for me, something that I was very, very pleased to see in their testimony was that about the change in their relationships with other people, because it's something I'd noticed a lot working with my mum, how it helped our relationship. Um, and both I and the carers had noted how both the residents had become more chatty, more outgoing. So the 97-year-old who spent all her time in her room, hardly been out of her room for months, was, she was being persuaded to go into the dining room for meals. She's being persuaded to spend time in the lounge with the other residents. Um, she was chatting a little bit, that kind of thing. So that was good to see. And the other one of the carers commented that she was more like her old self when she'd first come into the home. She'd be fairly sociable and chatty, and then she'd sort of clammed up and become more withdrawn, and she'd sort of come out again and been slightly more sociable and friendly and chatty. So that was something we all observed. And then the carers, in talking about themselves, these comments were made. So Hannah was the main carer for a resident who was quite aggressive. She'd regularly spit at Hannah or swear at her or maybe strike her. And this Hannah understandably found very stressful. And she said that, in doing the technique, what she'd do, she said, I'd stop and think, right, I can help this person. So I calm right down, and it's a lot better for me and a lot better for her. So she was noticing how the technique was helping her manage her own emotional reactions, and she was therefore better able to support the people in her care. And Liz, who could come over as being a bit kind of brusque and a little sharp sometimes with residents or visitors even, and her colleagues had noticed that about her behaviour and was changing it. And she's saying, I'm not flying off the handle. I'm finding solutions and working my way through without getting all upset. Even my managers have commented on how I'm easier to work with. So those were kind of nice examples of the way that the technique was enabling or helping or supporting the well-being of both the residents and the carers in all kinds of ways. Not just the most well-known ones of sort of pain and balance and mobility, but also interpersonal relationships and managing emotions and those kind of things. So, and the fact that it was working for both residents and carers, I thought was very, very pleasing, very, very satisfying.
Mm, that's really very striking results.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, very encouraging. Thank you.